The rain fell cold and steady on my thin suit jacket, but not as cold as the usher's words. "I'm sorry, sir. You're not on the list." I stood on the wet stone steps of St. Jude's, the church where I'd walked my daughter Sophia to her first day of Sunday school. Through the heavy oak doors, I could see her, a vision in ivory, laughing with her new husband, Mark. They were inside the house I paid for, and I was on the outside, publicly uninvited to her wedding. Only a week ago, I was in my kitchen, the familiar smell of sawdust and fresh coffee in the air. Sophia and Mark were there, showing me invoices. "The catering alone is $12,500, Dad," she'd said, waving a dismissive hand. "You only get married once." Mark had his arm around her, a proprietary gesture. We wanted to be perfect, a real reflection of us. My home, the one I'd built with my own two hands, was the silent collateral for their perfect day. Mark gave a slight condescending smirk from the church doorway, a silent confirmation of my exile. My hand tightened in my pocket around the small wooden ring box I had spent 40 hours carving. It was made from an oak sapling Helen and I planted the year Sophia was born. The box was supposed to hold their rings, but they didn't know about the false bottom I'd built into it, or the small, tarnished brass key hidden inside. The young usher looked miserable. "Mr. Vance was very clear," he mumbled, avoiding my eyes. "Only invited guests." I looked past him at Sophia. She was adjusting the veil on her hair, her movements fluid and graceful. For a single, shattering moment, our eyes met across the crowded vestibule. I saw a flicker of something, guilt, maybe, before she turned her back completely, presenting me with a wall of light satin and carefully arranged curls. The rejection was absolute. My fingers traced the intertwined doves I'd carved into the lid of the wooden box. The polished oak felt impossibly smooth, a stark contrast to the rough stone of the church walls. I could still smell the linseed oil I'd used to finish it. I had pictured this moment so differently. Me, placing the box in her hands, her genuine surprise and joy. Now, the sound of the organ starting up inside felt like a shovel full of dirt on a coffin. Mark glided to the doorway, his smile as sharp and synthetic as his suit. "Thomas, we felt your presence would just be a distraction. Sophia is emotional enough as it is." He used my first name, a subtle, deliberate severing of our familial tie. "It's better this way. No scenes." The phrase, "no scenes," was a threat, a reminder of my place. I was a problem to be managed, an unsightly piece of furniture to be hidden away on the big day. Just last month, Sophia had called me, sobbing. "The venue is going to cancel, Dad. I need $5,000 for the deposit by Friday." I didn't hesitate. I transferred the money from the account my late wife, Helen, and I had so carefully nurtured for our old age. I told her it was an early wedding gift. Seeing her now, so cold and composed, I realized it was just another payment for services rendered. But that was only half the truth. I didn't plead or argue. I gave a single, slow nod, a gesture of concession I did not feel. I saw a few of the other guests staring, their whispers masked by the rain. I recognized my neighbor, Mrs. Gable, her expression a mixture of pity and shock. The humiliation was a physical weight, pressing down on my shoulders. I turned from the closed doors and walked away, the sound of their joyous music a faint, mocking echo behind me. My old Ford pickup felt like a sanctuary. The cab smelled of sawdust and motor oil, the scent of my own labor. The rain hammered on the roof as I drove, not towards my empty house, but downtown. I parked across from the county administration building, a monolith of granite and grim bureaucracy. It was closed, of course, being a Saturday, but I just needed to look at it, to remember that some promises are written in ink and filed in steel drawers. I stared at the words carved above the entrance, Hall of Records. The rain blurred the letters into a gray smear. I remembered taking Sophia here when she was 6 to get a copy of her birth certificate. I told her, this is where all the important stories are kept, the ones that prove who we are. She had been so impressed by the hushed quiet and the massive, dusty books. Apparently she had forgotten which stories truly mattered. The house was deathly quiet when I returned. The air was cold, stale. In my workshop, I knelt, and unlocked a heavy steel filing cabinet, tucked behind a stack of cherry wood planks. My hands, steady as ever when holding a tool, trembled slightly as I pulled out a thick folder. On the tab, Helen's perfect cursive read, 412 Maple Street, deed and title. I opened it, and the dry rustle of the paper was the only sound in the room. Their voices echoed in my memory from 2 years prior. "It just makes sense to sign the house over now, Dad," Sophia had urged, her hand on my arm. "It will make the financing for the renovations so much easier." Mark, ever the helpful expert, had nodded. "It's simple estate planning, Thomas. A clean transfer avoids probate." He had the documents all ready, prepared by his lawyer. "Just a formality," he'd said, smiling. On my workbench, I spread out the quitclaim deed. My signature looked frail beneath their bold, decisive ones. They had been so reassuring, so full of promises about how I would always have a place here, how they would care for me. It was all a lie, a carefully constructed stage play to get my name off the single most valuable thing I owned. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. "David? Thomas Miller?" A crackle of surprise on the line, then recognition. "Tom, good to hear from you. What can I do for you?" David Chen and I went way back. We'd served together, and now he ran a small notary business. He was sharp, honest, and had a memory like a steel trap. "Dave, I need to ask about a quitclaim deed you notarized for me back in March 2022 for my daughter." "Oh, sure. I remember that day," David said instantly. "Your son-in-law, Mark, was there. Seemed to be in a real rush. Funny thing, he had you sign a second document after I'd stamped the deed. Asked me to just witness the signature, not notarize it. Said it was an internal bank paper, an escrow thing." I remember thinking it was an unusual way to handle a closing. A cold knot formed in my stomach. An escrow agreement. The memory was a blur of papers and jargon. Mark had been so smooth, talking a mile a minute about underwriting requirements and title clearance. "Sign here, Thomas." And here. My mind had been clouded with grief over Helen's passing. I trusted him. I went back to the file cabinet, my breath catching in my chest. I pulled out a folder labeled Misk Financial and started digging through a decade of old paperwork, and there it was. At the very bottom, a glossy, multi-page document from Vance Equity and Title. It felt foreign in my hands, unlike the other papers. It smelled faintly of Mark's cologne, a sharp, chemical scent. I unfolded it carefully. The heading was Contingent Escrow Hold and Reversion Clause Agreement. The words were a dense legal fortress designed to keep people like me out. But I was a carpenter. I knew how to dismantle a structure. I could hear Mark's voice, patient and patronizing. "This is just to protect the lender, Thomas. A temporary hold to ensure no old liens surface during the transfer. It's boilerplate, standard procedure." He had made it sound as important as a software license agreement. I ran my finger down the page, my eyes scanning the dense paragraphs, searching for the load-bearing beam that held the whole rotten structure up. My eyes locked on Clause 4B. In the event of grantor's incapacitation or a material breach of the informal life estate agreement, as witnessed by the attending parties, the property title held in escrow by Vance Equity and Title shall be subject to an immediate administrative freeze pending a 30-day review. A life estate agreement? They promised I could live here until I died. An administrative freeze. The words were a loaded gun. I looked at the little wooden ring box on my workbench. The intertwined doves, a symbol of love and fidelity, now seemed like a cruel joke. My gift, my blessing on their union. Their response had been to bar my entry, to treat me like a stranger, to humiliate me in front of my own neighbors. A material breach of the informal agreement that a father belongs at his daughter's wedding. It certainly felt material to me. For the next 48 hours, I lived on coffee and adrenaline. I sat at my old desktop computer, diving into county property databases, legal articles, and real estate forums. My mind, accustomed to blueprints and measurements, slowly began to map the intricate framework of their trap. The quitclaim deed was the public-facing wall, but the escrow agreement was the hidden mechanism, the secret door Mark had built right into the foundation. At 9 o'clock Monday morning, I was sitting on a stiff chair in a law office. Anna Rodriguez, SQ, Real Estate and Probate Law. I'd found her through the VFW Legal Aid Network. Her reviews all said the same thing. She was tenacious. I held the folder containing the deed and the agreement in my lap. My hands were steady now. I wasn't there to complain. I was there to get a professional opinion on my blueprint. Anna Rodriguez had sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. She read both documents without a word, her pen making small, precise notes on a yellow legal pad. Finally, she looked up. "He had you sign the quitclaim deed and then this escrow agreement on the same day?" I nodded. "Mark said it was with the bank's security." She let out a soft, appreciative whistle. "Mr. Miller, your son-in-law isn't just a lawyer. He's a con artist. He built a very clever trap," she said, tapping the escrow document. "This material breach clause is the key. It's intentionally vague. He likely added it to protect their investment in the house from you. For example, if you became difficult or tried to claim a stake later, he could manufacture a breach and use this to solidify his position with the title company. It's an intimidation tactic, pure and simple. He designed a legal cage and locked you in it." Anna continued, a grim smile touching her lips. "But here's the beautiful thing about sloppy language in a contract. The clause doesn't specify who gets to report the breach or what defines it. He gave you a weapon, assuming you'd be too old, too grieving, or too intimidated to ever figure out how to use it." I looked down at my calloused hands. They had built a house. They could surely dismantle one. "Though the plan is simple," Anna said, leaning forward. "We formally notify the title company of the breach. We will be polite, professional, and unyielding. We don't accuse, we just state the facts. You, the grantor, were publicly denied access and familial recognition by the grantees. We will request they enact Clause 4B immediately." She slid a piece of paper across the desk. "I'll need a sworn statement from you, and if you have a witness, that would be ironclad." My phone buzzed. A text from Sophia. No apology. Just a single cold sentence. "The caterers are asking why you haven't paid the final $1,500 balance you promised. They were on their honeymoon in Hawaii, a trip paid for with a second mortgage I now knew they'd taken out on my house, and she was texting me about a bill." I showed the text to Anna. She just nodded slowly. "Print that out. It's Exhibit B." That afternoon, I walked next door. The smell of Mrs. Gable's prize-winning roses thick in the air. I found her weeding her petunias. "Eleanor," I began, my voice feeling rusty. "I need to ask you for a favor. You saw what happened at the church on Saturday." Her eyes, usually so cheerful, filled with a fierce sympathy. She took off her gardening gloves immediately. "Thomas, you say the word. That boy is a snake, and your daughter has lost her way. Come inside." Over lukewarm tea in her fussy porcelain cups, Eleanor recounted everything she saw. The usher's embarrassment, Mark's smug look, Sophia turning her back on me. She remembered the whispers from other guests. "It was a shameful display," she said, her voice trembling with indignation. When I asked if she would sign an affidavit to that effect, she didn't hesitate. "I'll do more than that. I'll testify in court. What they did was a sin, plain and simple." The next morning, Anna emailed me the draft of the letter to Vance Equity and Title. It was a masterpiece of restrained aggression. It cited the specific agreement, the date of notarization, and the precise wording of Clause 4B. It described the material breach in dry factual terms, referencing my sworn statement and the signed affidavit of one Eleanor Gable as evidence. The final sentence was perfect. "We trust you will honor the terms of your own agreement and place an immediate administrative freeze on the title." That night I sat in the dark, holding an old photograph of Helen. She was smiling, her head tilted just so, standing on the unfinished frame of the house. We had poured everything into this place. Not just money, but our youth, our hopes. "You always said to build things on a solid foundation, Tommy," I whispered to her picture. They thought the foundation was the deed. They were wrong. It was respect. I knew then, with absolute certainty, that she would have approved. I sent the letter via certified mail, return receipt requested. The act felt momentous. The clank of the mail slot, final, irrevocable sound. I paid the extra $4.15 for tracking. I imagined the envelope traveling across the city, a quiet paper and ink missile aimed at the heart of their carefully constructed world. For the first time since that rainy Saturday, I felt the tight knot of humiliation in my chest begin to loosen, replaced by a cold, patient calm. 3 days passed. The online tracking showed the letter was delivered and signed for. Silence. I worked in my shop, the familiar rasp of a hand playing on wood a comforting rhythm. I repaired a wobbly chair, refinished an old side table. Each completed task was a small act of restoration, of making something right again. I was waiting for them to make a move, to reveal themselves. I knew they would. Arrogance like theirs could never stay quiet for long. While cleaning out my desk, I found the caterer's initial quote from 6 months ago, marked paid in full. The $5,000 I'd given Sophia for the deposit had been a lie. She'd already paid it. Weeks later, I'd found a credit card statement showing a charge for 2 first-class tickets to Hawaii, purchased the day after I transferred her the money. My gift for her wedding feast had become her luxury flight, but that was only half the truth. The phone rang on Thursday afternoon. It was a restricted number. Mr. Thomas Miller, a young, hesitant voice asked. My name is Brenda, from the Compliance Department at Vance Equity and Tidy. We've received a letter from your legal counsel. There seems to be some confusion regarding the escrow account for 412 Maple Street. Confusion, that was the word she used. I pictured a flock of pigeons, startled by a hawk. I let the silence hang for a moment before speaking. There's no confusion on my end, I said, my voice even and calm. I am invoking a clause in an agreement your company drafted and holds. I have a witness and documentation. I expect you to follow your own procedures. Brenda stammered. Yes, sir. I see the notes here. This is highly unusual. I'll have to escalate this to our senior legal counsel. You will be contacted shortly. Shortly meant a courier arriving the next afternoon with a thick, menacing envelope. It was for Mark's prestigious law firm, where he was a junior partner. Inside was a cease and desist letter. It was filled with threats and accusations, frivolous claims, tortious interference, defamation. It demanded I retract my letter to the title company within 24 hours, or face a lawsuit for damages. For a moment, my resolve wavered. The threats felt real. The language designed to terrify. I called Anna immediately and read her the letter. I could almost hear her smiling over the phone. He's a fool, Tom. A panicked, arrogant fool. He just put his conflict of interest in writing. He's using his own firm to threaten a party in a private transaction he's personally involved in. This isn't a chess move. He just knocked the whole board over. Don't respond. We wait. This just became much, much worse for him. That evening, Sophia called, her voice high-pitched with rage. What are you doing? He shrieked. The sounds of a luau faintly audible in the background. Mark's firm just called him. You're trying to ruin his career, to make us homeless, after we gave you a place to live. I gripped the receiver, the plastic groaning under the pressure. A place to live? Sophia, I built that place, with my own hands. Before you were even born. You are a selfish, bitter old man, she sobbed, the tears sounding theatrical and hollow. You couldn't stand to see me happy. So you had to pull this stunt and ruin my honeymoon. I waited for her to finish her tirade. When there was only the sound of her ragged breathing, I spoke, my voice quiet. You barred me from your wedding, Sophia, in front of everyone. A father should be at his daughter's wedding. That was the agreement. On Saturday, a week after the wedding, I took a drive. I didn't know where I was going, but my hands guided the old truck towards Maple Street. As I turned the corner, my blood ran cold. There, hammered into the center of the lawn I had seeded and mowed for 40 years, was a real estate sign. A bright, garish red sign. For sale pending offer. They weren't just taking my home. They were flipping it before they even returned from their honeymoon. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The rush to get me to sign the deed, the renovation financing, the escrow account. It was all a setup for a quick sale. The life estate they had promised me was never meant to last more than a few months. They needed me out of the way so they could cash in on the hot housing market. My presence was an inconvenience, a loose end they needed to tie off. The betrayal was complete. I took a clear photo of the sign with my old flip phone. The quality was poor, but the words "for sale" were unmistakable. I drove straight to a copy shop and had it printed, then drove to Anna's office and slid it under her door. I called and left her a message. "Anna, it's Tom. Check your door." They didn't just breach the agreement, they committed fraud from the very beginning. "The house is for sale." Anna called me back within the hour, her voice electric. "Tom, this is it. This is the kill shot." The escrow agreement was predicated on an informal life estate. Putting the house up for sale is definitive proof of their fraudulent intent. Vance Equity and Title is now exposed to massive liability. They facilitated a fraudulent transfer. They will move heaven and earth to get out from under this. Get ready. Things are about to happen very, very fast. She was right. The next morning, Anna sent a second letter to the title company's general counsel, overnighted. It was short, brutal, and included copies of Mrs. Gable's affidavit, Sophia's text message, Mark's threatening letter from his own firm, and the photograph of the for sale sign. It didn't request a freeze anymore. It alleged conspiracy to commit real estate fraud and stated our intent to file a formal complaint with the State Banking and Insurance Commission. Less than 6 hours later, my phone rang. "Mr. Miller, this is George Cromwell, Senior Vice President of Risk Management at Vance Equity and Title." His voice was deep, serious, and drenched in concern. Gone was the dismissive tone of the compliance clerk. "We have received your counsel's correspondence. I want to personally apologize for any distress this situation has caused. There are several grave irregularities here that require our immediate and full attention. We need to schedule an in-person meeting." Cromwell continued, his voice tight with controlled fury. "It has come to my attention that Mark Vance is not only your son-in-law, but was, at the time of this transaction, an associate in our commercial title division. He used a proprietary escrow template intended for corporate clients, which is a flagrant violation of company policy. He appears to have leveraged his position to create this unfortunate situation. His actions do not reflect the practices of our organization." The backpedaling had begun. The meeting was set for Wednesday at 10 a.m. sharp in their boardroom on the 40th floor of the tallest building downtown. "We have instructed Mr. Vance and his wife to be present," Cromwell said, the implication clear. This was not a negotiation, it was a summons. The public arena had shifted from the church steps to a corporate boardroom. The humiliation I had endured in the rain was about to be returned in a climate-controlled, soundproofed room. On Wednesday morning, I put on the same gray suit I had worn to the wedding. It felt different now, no longer the clothes of a victim, but armor. As I was about to leave, I saw the small wooden ring box on my workbench. I picked it up. The carved doves felt cool and smooth in my palm. I slipped it into my suit pocket. It was a reminder of a promise made and a promise broken. A piece of evidence. Driving downtown, the city traffic seemed to move in slow motion. I felt a strange sense of peace, the kind that comes when the outcome is no longer in doubt. Mark thought he was a master of the game, manipulating clauses and legal documents. He thought he had built an unbreakable cage of paper. But I was a carpenter. I knew that the strongest structures are built on honesty. And their entire world was a house of cards in a hurricane. The boardroom was a temple of corporate power. Polished mahogany, floor-to-ceiling windows, a panoramic view of the city. Anna and I sat on one side of the vast table. George Cromwell, a man with the weary eyes of a career problem solver, sat at the head. A minute later, the door opened and Sophia and Mark walked in. They looked tanned from their honeymoon, but their faces were tight with a mixture of anger and fear. Sophia refused to look at me, staring at a fixed point on the far wall. Mark, however, met my gaze with a defiant glare. He sat down, arranging his leather briefcase with a sharp, angry snap. He was still playing the role of the powerful attorney, the one in control. He didn't understand yet. He was no longer a lawyer in this room. He was an exhibit. Cromwell cleared his throat. the sound unnaturally loud in the silent room. "We are here to resolve the matter of the title for 412 Maple Street. Our internal review has confirmed several profound breaches of professional ethics and company policy by Mr. Vance." He looked directly at Mark, his expression one of utter disgust. "Mark, you have put this firm in a position of extreme liability. You are a disgrace. This is a family dispute." Mark blustered, his voice a little too loud. "A misunderstanding that my father-in-law is blowing out of proportion." Cromwell held up a hand, silencing him instantly. "Do not insult my intelligence. We have a sworn affidavit from a witness to your public treatment of Mr. Miller. We have evidence you used company resources to commit what appears to be blatant real estate fraud. This is far beyond a family dispute." He slid a single document across the polished table. It stopped directly in front of Mark. "This is a deed of reconveyance. It transfers the title of the property, free and clear of any liens you have placed on it, back to Thomas Miller. The second mortgage you took out will be settled by the firm as part of our internal restitution. You and your wife will sign it now. This is not a request." Sophia finally looked up, her face pale with shock. "You can't do that," Sophia cried out, her voice cracking. "We have an offer on the house. We've made plans." Cromwell's gaze shifted to her, and it was utterly devoid of sympathy. "Your plans, Mrs. Vance, were predicated on a crime. Your offer is void. The listing is being pulled as we speak. You have no legal claim to that property. Your husband saw to that when he drafted an agreement with a loophole big enough to drive a truck through." Mark stared at the document, his face ashen. He had been so proud of his cleverness, his ability to manipulate the system. Now, that same system was being turned against him with brutal efficiency. The very tools he used to build his trap were now the bars of his own cage. His career, his reputation, his unearned wealth, all evaporating under the harsh fluorescent lights of that boardroom. Cromwell turned to me. "Mr. Miller, on behalf of Vance Equity and Title, I offer our most sincere apology. We will ensure the title is corrected and recorded with the county by the end of business today. We will also be covering all of Mrs. Rodriguez's legal fees." He then looked back at Mark. "As for you, your employment is terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building after you have signed these papers." Sophia began to sob, not tears of remorse, but of rage and self-pity. "Dad, please," she pleaded, finally looking at me. "Don't do this. Where will we live?" I thought of the rain on the church steps, of the "for sale" sign on my lawn, of the 40 years of love and labor I had poured into that home. I thought of Helen and what she would have wanted. I said nothing. Mark's hand trembled as he picked up the pen. His signature, once so bold and arrogant on the quitclaim deed, was now a spidery, hesitant scrawl. He slid the paper over to Sophia. She looked at it as if it were a snake, then snatched the pen and signed, her stroke a vicious slash of ink. The deal was done. The house was mine again. But there was one more piece of business. I reached into my pocket and placed the small wooden ring box on the center of the table. The carved doves seemed to gleam under the recessed lighting. Mark and Sophia both flinched, as if it were a grenade. "This was your wedding gift," I said, my voice steady. "I was going to give it to you at the church." I pushed it slowly across the table until it rested in front of them. Sophia stared at it, her tears stopping. "What is it?" she whispered. "A reminder," I said. I reached over and gently pressed a hidden seam near the hinge. With a soft click, the false bottom popped open. A small tarnished brass key fell out, landing with a tiny metallic clink on the mahogany. It was the original key to the front door of 412 Maple Street, the one Helen and I had used for 40 years. Mark stared at the key, then at me, a flicker of comprehension in his eyes. He finally understood. I hadn't just stumbled upon a legal loophole. I had always held the key. I had built the house. I knew its secrets, just as I knew the secrets hidden in the paperwork he'd had me sign. He had underestimated the man who had built everything he had tried to steal. Cromwell gave a curt nod. "I believe we are concluded here." Anna gathered our papers. A small, triumphant smile on her face. Two uniformed security guards entered the room, their presence a silent, fiery judgment. They stood behind Mark's chair, waiting. The air was thick with the smell of defeat, a scent far more pungent than Mark's expensive cologne. Sophia looked at me one last time, her expression a toxic brew of hatred and desperation. "You've left us with nothing," she spat. I thought of the $5,000 she stole for her honeymoon, of the second mortgage they'd taken out to fund their lavish lifestyle. "No," I said, my voice soft but clear. "I left you with exactly what you've earned." I stood up, my chair making a soft scraping sound on the floor. I walked towards the door, Anna beside me. I did not look back. I could feel their eyes on my back, but I didn't give them the satisfaction. The public humiliation on the church steps had been answered here, in this private, sterile room. The restoration was not loud or joyous. It was quiet, absolute, and devastatingly complete. Justice, I learned, is not always about raising your voice, but about knowing which documents to sign. In the elevator, Anna squeezed my arm. "You did it, Tom." I looked at my reflection in the polished brass doors. I saw an old man in a gray suit, but my shoulders were straighter than they had been in years. I felt lighter. The weight of their betrayal, the sting of their disrespect, had been lifted. The house was waiting for me, my home. That evening, I returned to Maple Street. The for sale sign had already been removed. The lawn looked scarred where it had been hammered in. I walked up the familiar stone path and pulled out my old set of keys. I slid the original tarnished brass key into the lock. It turned smoothly, the tumblers clicking into place with a sound like a final, satisfying chord. The house was empty. They had already moved all of Helen's old furniture into storage, replacing it with cold, modern pieces staged for the sale. The air smelled of paint and lemon-scented cleaner, a sterile imitation of a home. But it was my house again. The foundation was sound. The structure was strong. It just needed to be lived in again, to be filled with the scent of sawdust and fresh coffee instead of greed. I walked into the kitchen and saw a stack of mail on the counter they had left behind. On top was a glossy postcard from Hawaii. "Having a wonderful time. Wish you were here," it read in Sophia's looping script. Beneath it was a formal-looking envelope. I tore it open. It was an eviction notice, addressed to me, giving me 30 days to vacate the premises, dated the day of her wedding. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for a locksmith.